Hello everybody, welcome back to Brailsford Woodworks Refinished. Today, a piece of wood that I've only turned one time. This is a piece of dogwood. I got this piece of wood from my last employer. It was a tree that was sick and they had to take it down. It must have been pretty much at the end of its age for a dogwood because it was pretty big. I would say over a foot in diameter at the base. Alright, so first impressions about this wood is that it cuts very, very well, but it is some hard wood. It was not as hard to cut as pecan, but it was harder to cut than oak or hard maple. I seem to be having a hard time getting the cut right here. I think that's a combination of the hardness and some of the surface imperfections down at the bottom. So I'm working the bowl down, getting it to the final shape that I want on the outside. And once I get through all this bark, I'll form myself a tenon on the bottom so I can turn it around and hold it in my chuck. And I like to use a push cut, and you can see once I've gotten through the imperfections that it is cutting much nicer at this point. I'm using my Thompson 3/4 inch bowl gouge, and right now I just want to get through the rest of this bark before I start working on the tenon. So I'm about there. Now I'm going to start forming the tenon. I've got my skew out and I'm using it to both form the dovetail on the tenon and do a little bit of scraping with it. So I'm choosing to leave a rim on this bowl, so I am going to sand it up to 400 on the outside before I turn it around and start to hollow it. So I've got it turned around and now I'm going to start working on hollowing the bowl. Before I start digging into the meat of the bowl, I always like to flatten out the top before I start digging in. Makes it easier. So I'm using a push cut starting from the center and working out, and I always try to keep one eye on the outside of the bowl as well as what I'm cutting on the inside, so I'm maintaining a uniform thickness. Right here I'm using my Ellsworth 5/8 inch bowl gouge. This is probably one of the last few bowls I was able to do with it. You can look at it, it's getting pretty short. So now I'm switching over to my Thompson 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and I usually like to use that as kind of a finishing gouge for the inside of my bowls. So now I'm forming the rim that I had talked about leaving. And I'm just trying to get a shape on it that I like. I'm going to use my skew one more time as a scraper to help finish shaping the rim. I'm going to finish doing all my sanding, and I work up to a 400 grit. So now it's time to start working on the tenon on the bottom, and in this case I'm leaving it as a foot. So I'm using my Easy Wood Tools detail tool to put a little bit of a cove there at the bottom of that tenon and make it into more of a base. And now I'm putting a concave bottom on it because it'll stand flatter that way, and I usually put a little bit of detail as well. And now I'm going to sand it to 400 grit, and I'm also going to add some burn details as well. You'll see me do that here in a minute. And here it is, and I just have a copper wire I use with a couple handles on it. Be careful after you finish doing something like that because that wire is very hot. That comes with experience. Now I'm applying my brand. I'll sand one more time and it'll be ready for finish. So I'm adding my finish now, and in this case it's just some Danish oil. I'm going to do my final buffing and this bowl is finished. Hate to tell you that I really didn't get real good views of this bowl in its complete form, but I've tried to narrow out stuff to show it as best as I can. I will say there's a tiny bit of burl in there, and it does have a kind of a salmon color somewhere between cherry and Bradford pear. And you can see I added 2 burn details on it, and I will tell you this bowl sold at the very first show it went to right after I finished it. So I was pretty pleased with it. I do have one picture of it, and it's with our little girl, Millie, and she, unfortunately, is no longer with us. She was a little beagle, and she was absolutely adorable. All right, that's it for today. Thank you, and please join me back on Brailsford Woodworks Refinished. Bye-bye.